The way we look at it, it looks like there's a core group of what they consider their taste elevation platform, which is
Their
the
what?
sauces and the seasonings. Taste elevation.
Oh, please. That's got McKinsey written all over it. Is that just
Uh,
spices and condiments?
That's spices and
There you
condiments,
go.
yeah, exactly. And then they have, that's kind of been their growth area for the last couple of years. So we think that that's really going to be what will be the residual part of Heinz. And then it's undetermined yet exactly what will go into the rest of the business, but it'll be largely those grocery categories where they've invested a lot to try to revitalize brands, and it just hasn't worked in terms of really rejuvenating sales.
You know, when I think about brands in the shop, going to the supermarket, boy, those house brands, private label. Talk to us about the growth of private label in general. Boy, and if you're a brand like an Oscar Mayer or something that you spent gajillions of dollars over 100 years, it seems to kind of go by the wayside almost.
It's true. You've got a good point, Paul. Private label has been consistently growing and got a huge bump since the pandemic.
Yep.
And part of that is that the retailers have really invested in the quality and the differentiation of those private label brands. So where consumers now really consider them not just a replacement for national brands, but in some instances just regular brands of their own right. And so, Kraft Heinz actually had reduced some of its exposure to private label when they sold off the Planters business, when they sold off the cheese, like the shredded cheese business with Kraft. But the core grocery business, they do still have a lot of exposure to private label.
So is this a lot of competition from, let's say, startup food companies appealing to younger consumers? I mean, what kind of sparked this?
Well, there's really been a shift in the way consumers are looking at brands. And unless you own a long legacy brand that you can reinvent and really, drive interest from younger generations, it's really hard to keep that going. And so what we've seen is that they've done a good job with revitalizing things like Philly cream cheese. But despite a lot of investment, brands like Capri-Sun, Oscar Mayer, Maxwell House, these brands just aren't resonating with younger consumers. And that means that the growth prospects for those brands are a lot lower. And that makes it hard to really bill yourself as a growth type oriented company.
So I know, as I think back to my M&A memory banks 10 years ago, Kraft and Heinz, Berkshire Hathaway had a big hand in putting these two companies together. And look now, they're still the largest shareholder with just under 28% of the stock. I assume Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, has kind of signed off on this deal, or is open to it at least?
I would assume that they're open to it. Over time, Berkshire Hathaway has actually done quite well out of this deal, even though Kraft Heinz as an overall entity is probably disappointed in the overall analysis. But the merger was in 2015. It's been 10 years. The value of the deal at the time in 2015 was $45 billion. Today's market cap, it's $32 billion. And yes, they've sold off a couple of brands, but it just hasn't materialized to be the type of growth that I think Berkshire Hathaway initially envisioned it would happen.
Jennifer, can you dig more into some of the advantages, but also the risks associated with breaking up the company?
Obviously some of the advantages, seems very similar to what Kellogg did when they spun Kellanova and WK Kellogg out into two separate companies. They separated the growth prospects and then those from the slow growth areas. That's very similar to what Kraft Heinz seems to be doing. Obviously, if you can focus on growth areas, that gives you undivided attention to really expand and grow. That would be an advantage. I think one of the disadvantages, and this is something that's kind of a broader question to consider, is whether there's a cycle that's starting. Because we've seen companies like Kellanova split. We see Unilever spinning off their ice cream business. And those new entities are now being bought up by others. So you've got Mars acquiring Kellanova, you have Ferrero acquiring WK Kellogg. But those, in order to get regulatory approval, you have to have categories that aren't overlapping. And so you're seeing a new birth of new kind of conglomerates of dissimilar portfolios. And so it makes me wonder if we're setting up another cycle where in another 5 years, 10 years, we're going to see these companies that have been buying up the underperforming brands going through a similar type of activity.